Hello and welcome back to the Pro AV Industry Technology podcast. My name is Marius, and today I'll be going through part 3 of my basic principles of a PA system, and this article is centered around distributed PA systems. Right, so without further ado, let's get going with part 3. So, what we've discussed so far in part 1 and part 2 is how a PA system works and its intended function. Basic elements on how to connect a PA system and splitting this up as sources, modifiers and destinations, types of PA systems, full range point source PA system, two-way PA systems and three-way PA systems, and the fundamental differences between a two-way and three-way PA system. So, like I explained, this article will cover the basic principles of a distributed PA system and to look where this PA system type is found, used, and its basic functionality. So, a distributed PA system simply delivers audio to many speakers rather than just a few. So, I mean, if you look around, if you go to shopping malls, your school, halls, boardrooms, hotels, that sort of thing, chances are that if you look up into the ceiling, you will find many speakers distributed over a area within that actual room or area that you're in. This likely is a distributed PA system, and they all work together to form obviously one system. But what I will do is I'll break this down for you today so you can understand the very basic principles of a 100 volt line system is how we term it, how it works, and why your normal 8 ohm speaker will not work, because you obviously need multiple ones. I mean, there's certain systems, for instance, that I used to install that consisted of 20, 30, 40 speakers, depending on obviously the size of the venue or the room that I was installing them in. So typically 8 ohm speakers you might find in like a hi-fi system or a basic PA system, but in a distributed PA system they just won't work because there's just not enough resistance to make the use of multiple speakers on one amplifier. So how do you overcome this? So typically what's used is a step down transformer. These transformers are connected directly to an 8 ohm speaker, and how it works is that these transformers actually takes in a 100 volt line input and then steps it down so that it can actually connect to a low impedance speaker. So how does this all work? So basic Ohm's law, power equals voltage times current. So there's a bit of mathematics with this, so you have to work out how many speakers you want to use with regards to the amount of power that your amplifier puts out. So I've done a bit of basic calculations here for you right at the bottom, which you can obviously go through. Then I'll also go through the disadvantages and advantages of a 100 volt line system. Typically a 100 volt line speaker system operates at 100 volt RMS. It also depends on the amplifier that you use for this. There are dedicated manufacturers that manufacture 100 volt line amplifiers, but typically with certain brands and manufacturers that I've come across, you can actually use professional amplifiers, 2-channel professional amplifiers, run them in bridge mode, and that'll produce 100 volt of line power to power a multitude of speakers, obviously depending on the output wattage of that amplifier. So here is a basic sort of ceiling speaker with an attached transformer and how that's connected. Typically there's quite a few different variants of transformers available. It just depends on your application and the wattage of speakers that you would choose. So in this case over here, this is a 20 watt transformer, meaning it'll produce 20 watts of power to the actual speaker. But this is also what we call a multi-tap transformer, which you can select the wattage that you want to go to your speaker. So essentially it'll have a common connection, which is normally a black wire, and then different colored wires for each of the wattages that you could choose to connect to your speaker. Also you can choose between the resistance of the speaker that you will be connecting to this transformer. So in this case here you can actually connect a 16 ohm speaker or even an 8 ohm speaker. But in most cases, what I used to do is make use of just an 8 ohm speaker. So, for an example here, this is how the transformer works. So you've got your side which goes to the amplifier, and then the other side that goes to the speaker. So essentially here you've got a common black, which is your negative, and then a whole bunch of different colored cables here, which then you can select your wattage, which goes to the amplifier. And on this side here is again a common or a 0, which is your negative, and a positive, which then connects to your speaker. So how many speakers can I connect to my 100-volt line system? Well, that's the age-old question, isn't it? If, for instance, you've got a 100-watt amplifier, it is capable of powering 100-watt speakers, each set at 1 watt, okay? Or 50 speakers, each speaker is tapped at 2 watts, and so on and so forth. So it all depends on the actual output wattage of your amplifier, because that'll be its capacity. So here's a few tips that you can go through. For instance, I'll just read through a couple of them. Keep all your speakers in the same polarity. Amplifiers are marked with positive and negative on the 100-volt output terminals, and speakers are marked with red and black on the input terminals, and maintain the same polarity throughout your speaker circuit. And also very important to note is that do not ever mix 100-volt line speakers with traditional low impedance speakers with the same circuit. If you really want to do that, then it's suggested that you use a separate amplifier to power those low impedance speakers, because if you put low impedance speakers into the same circuit as a 100-volt line system, you could damage the system, specifically amplifier. So always take care of that. So always leave a bit of extra power, my suggestion. If you want to add on speakers and on the later stage and you don't really want to upgrade the actual amplifier, so always leave a little bit in reserve. Okay, so for instance, if you've got a 100-watt amplifier, always make sure that you get up to about 80 watts in terms of capacity. So always leave about 20% spare capacity on that actual amplifier. That means at a later stage, if let's say for instance you've got a restaurant and that restaurant wants to expand, then you can do so. Instead of having to run a separate amplifier and so on and so forth, you can just tap onto the existing system and run another line to another group of speakers. So yes. So quick recap. Part 3, distributed PA system. So what have you learned? Distributed PA systems are commonly referred to as 100-volt line systems. Okay, 100-volt line systems have a multitude of speakers connected in parallel to one amplifier. The speakers in a 100-volt line system all have transformers to step down voltages coming to the speaker. A 100-volt line system is limited to the amplifier output power and number of speakers tapped at the appropriate wattage. Calculate your system's overall wattage and calculate at least 20% additional amplifier power for future speaker additions. Right. So I hope all of that makes sense. Like I said, please take the time to read through the actual blog, because there's actual, very valuable information there, and also how to do the actual calculations. Thank you very much. This was part 3 of my basic principles of a PA system. I really appreciate it all. Thank you very much for viewing, and I'll see you with part 4.